Greetings, viewers, and welcome to the 120th episode of Roll of a Tangent. Today we'll discuss a 1946 horror tale by Henry Kuttner, writing under the name Keith Hammond. The story is Call Him Demon, a title doubly apt, for it applies not only to the monster lurking in a Los Angeles family home, but also to the 6-year-old child who defeats it. The other children in the story are a few years older than little Bobby, but are nevertheless young enough to know the truth that the adult family members cannot see, namely, that the recently arrived uncle is no uncle at all, is in fact not human but merely a detached section of the monster down below. By some mental imagery, the thing communicates with the youngsters and lets them know when it is hungry and must have raw red meat. When that happens, they secretly buy meat and go down to the thing's lair, where in dreamlike encounters they hand over the offering. They instinctively know that they have to obey this summons, that the consequences of not doing so would be frightful. Then comes the crisis when all the family members except little Bobby and his grandmother are called away on an outing. The children have to trust Bobby to feed the thing on his own. He agrees to, but the trouble is he turns out not to be reliable. I won't be so demonic as to spoil the ending for you at this early stage. I'll rely on my teammates to do that. But let me add that the greatness of the story lies in its contrast between child and adult psychology. Where adults would have been powerless, in the innocent evil of little Bobby, the monster meets its match. Right, who wants to take up the floor, as it were? Nikki, would you like to let us have your comments?
Sure. I think it's a tradition at this point that I begin these. Hi everybody. Yeah, we've got a interesting story from 1946. It's also another crown phrase of mine, an interesting story. There you go, if you're counting up. It is several chapters long, but it doesn't feel like it. The passage of time is done really well by the story itself. At least I found. The perspective is also well done. Like, I believe that these are children and they're doing their children-y stuff. As some of the viewers might know, and of course the crew, if there's a horror story and involves children, for me that's like the worst horror story in the best possible way, because I hate it when something bad happens to children. And here, I mean, it's pretty crazy. I mean, there are some fantastical elements, of course, for people who live in 2026. The idea that $4 and about 60 cents can get you regular amounts of pounds of meat of 200 grams. That's incredible. But obviously, different times and different converted exchange rate. You have to adjust for that. Otherwise, the story is quite grounded, and it has a lot of interesting moments, especially with the very slow reveal of what's exactly happening in the attic and how it all works. I like that the first time that the children go there, we don't get to see it, because Jane, I believe, the one that doesn't go and the one who we're following, the one that we're in the shoes of, she only goes there the second time that the story, pushes in on that issue. The monster itself is cool, threatening, without ever really doing anything until the very end. Still being this like overwhelming presence. Yeah, I think the story has a lot of good sway, and it is a great example of how to do horror without any gore or any crazy imagery, while still making it feel otherworldly and, having the suspense there. Now, you all me as the fan of the big, bombastic, huge creatures, 2.5 meter tall space marines shooting their bullets that are basically rockets, exploding the backs of Tyranids with a simple smash of their fist. But I too am a connoisseur occasionally. I do partake in wine, not just straight whiskey and vodka. So it was an enjoyable read, and there was a lot of nice, how do I say it, writing, how would I say it, tricks that I saw the author perform over the time of the story, and they all worked really well. Like, you can truly see that he knows his craft, this Henry Kuttner. I haven't read anything else from him, unfortunately, but this story made a very good impression. Yeah, I very much enjoyed it. Anthony, what did you think of the story?
I really enjoyed it. I'm shocked at how much I enjoyed it, because not that I didn't expect to or know what to expect, but we had just read last episode a very different, Robert was intimating that the story by Kuttner that we read last episode was very different, and it was, but I wasn't sure how.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, I wasn't part of that episode, but I did read that one.
Yeah.
So that was also Kuttner,
yes.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah. So that was just pure, science fiction, maybe with a little horror sprinkled in, with space vampires and space travel and, kind of retro-ish tech, to it, and which is great. It was sort of an old pulpy space opera of sorts, but this was just, such a, I aspire to be a writer across different genres. And this is, he did it masterfully here, and he just jumped. I liked the other story, but this one was just excellent. It had a strange blend and a wonderful blend of writing from the perspective of children, but not using childish language, and just the repetition of some phrases and some ways of putting things, like wrong uncle. What would a kid call someone, that was not quite right, that was sort of a monstrous projection of a greater cosmic being, that in human, projecting a false human form, which reminded me so much of it. It reminded me so much of it, and I wonder if Stephen King was inspired by this in some way. But just some horrific creature kind of projecting itself into the real world to get, victims at some point. But it was just, the turn of phrase was amazing that he used, and just the way he described things was truly horrific. And the children, the banality of evil of children, as Robert also intimated, and at the end the child is call him demon. But I almost feel like I want to was it little Bobby, I think, was the the one who was the kid who didn't quite take everything so seriously, and he just treated it like a game. But I guess the fact that he knew enough to let poor old grandma become the last meal of the creature, or a meal of the creature, the last meal, because he gained inspiration from the story of the Jungle Book, right, and how they did away with Shere Khan, right? So just learning of this trap from evil, but not quite getting the consequences in the real world, and just treating it as a game. So there is, I guess, something wrong with Bobby. I wanted to let him off the hook a little bit, but because again, that squishy nature of the reality for children. But the more, I think I need to read it again, and this is a story I definitely want to read again, which I didn't get from the last story that we read by Kuttner. But I'm amazed that now, the more I think about it, the more I want to go back and reread it and enjoy it the other way. But just how he went through the process. Oh, and even with getting to the creature just wasn't in the attic. At first I thought it was in like some basement somewhere or some other outbuilding, but they go to the attic and they access where it is, its reality, or whatever realm it's in, by doing sort of a children's rhyme, right? And that's how they get into its dimension, which was like a whole thing. Now that I'm thinking about it, was another amazing twist and aspect to things, and adds that creepiness of like twisting childhood to it. And then getting back out, they have to kind of complete the rhyme. But yeah, I was kind of blown away by this. Like, I liked the prior story, like I said, but this is, I guess maybe his bread and butter for Kuttner, and maybe Rob can fill us in more on that. He seems to know more about Kuttner, obviously. So, and maybe has experience with more of his stories, but just that jump from that other story to this was just leaps and bounds, far and away the better story, I think, in this case. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. XJ, what about your thoughts?
Um, I have very similar thoughts to yours. Like the whole time I was reading it, I was like, this is prototype it, or actually, I'm gonna have to say maybe a better it, if I can say that, because
Wow.
Much shorter.
it's yeah, it's
Much shorter.
definitely, it's like the length that does make it better in my opinion.
Yeah.
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 But I, like you, I was like, I also read the other Kuttner science fiction story, and this is like such a wild departure. It's like it's not even 180. It's like parallel, two different tracks altogether, and
Almost doesn't feel like the same writer.
it does not.
Yeah,
It
not
does
at all.
not. It does not. Um,
Mm.
and and again, Anthony, I was like really taken by the way the description of the children's part, just how it's done. I don't know if this is actually how children think, but I'll buy it. I'll buy it. And that little ritual at the attic, where they perform to get into Rugedo's realm, is also childlike enough that I'll buy it. Let's say, so written in a way that does sell, that does seem across as like a children's game that you might play on a playground, and then imagining that you are like, it's very it does have this fevered, sort of like a fevered impression that I get when I was reading Alice in Wonderland. But you know, maybe these are wrong children. I don't know.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm thoroughly impressed with this story. I don't know what I was expecting reading this, but it was not that. And the twist at the end totally caught me by surprise, because that was I honestly wasn't expecting. I was expecting a very different outcome, to be quite honest. Yeah, yeah. And this is well, I guess two monsters duked it out and one won. Yeah. By the way, I think the kid that you're thinking of, Anthony, is Charlie. I think that's the one that was like treating it like a game.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was Charlie. Yeah, I know there was, the kids kind of all blended together at some
Yeah.
point, but yeah, I think maybe it was Charlie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it was like the author was just showcasing us throughout these children the different stages of childhood, and maybe it was different stages of childhood he personally experienced. So he gave all of these kids certain ages and the traits he either saw in other children or in himself at the time. That's kind of how it felt to me, and that's why it felt so believable. Um, well, yeah, there was a lot of mysticism about the idea of childhood and one's imagination and what you can really do with it when you're young, right? I don't know if any of you remember, but the things I would imagine and the hallucinations, let's put it like that I would see would be grandiose, especially when I played with my toys. I would imagine blockbuster movies out of nowhere for hours, and I would not get bored by just having two little toys and bashing them together like they were fighting in different angles. So yeah, I can kind of see where he's going with it, but he very much gave a much more how do I say this? not very good with words today. Like a Lovecraftian feeling
For sure.
to the idea of childhood and its possible powers. You know, it's also a very interesting way to basically be like, yeah, the only people who can interact with the situation or fix it are the children, because their minds are not locked yet in some capacity for some reason in our development. So they're the only ones who can understand the monster, and so they have to deal with this situation. Because most of the issues I have with a lot of horror stories involving children is, okay, for any of this to happen, is the adults have to be absolutely shit at taking care of their children. Like they don't pay attention to them at all. You know, that's why this horror story can be happening. But here it kind of makes sense. It's written into the story. It's woven in that, hey, they just don't perceive it. They don't
the kids are just being watched by granny and like the aunts and uncles, right? So they're not really being, while the parents are away or whatever, and I'm looking at the end of the story. It was little Bobby was the bad one, right? So just like just Robert, those Roberts, man, those kids named Robert, always getting into trouble.
He's gonna give it a 10 out of 10. You see the monster?
But maybe this was Robert as a little boy. Who knows? Playing with strange creatures from other dimensions.
Robert, where were you on that day in 1926?
Yeah, where were you? But yeah. So, and it was just, and there's other questions too. Before we speaking of Robert, we want to get his impression too. But just there's things that they don't explain in the story that are just fine. But it leads your imagination to wonder, how did these kids? Unless I missed it in the story, how did the kids gain access to or learn about Rigetto? It's. We don't know that,
dropped
right?
into the middle that this has been happening for a bit. Robert, what are your thoughts?
Robert, let's get into our Bobby. What is our Bobby thing?
Where's the aunt?
Taking the last question, how do they communicate with Ruggero anyway? I think it must be that you just have to manufacture your own answer as a reader and say to yourself, well, there must be direct mind contact in some form that can work between the monster and children, whereas it couldn't work between the monster and adults. In other words, children's minds are kind of plastic in a way. They're malleable. And the whole story is developing that theme in a way. I chose this story actually because I thought that there might be a chance that it would scare you guys, because it certainly scared me. But then I'm not jaded, it doesn't take a lot to scare me. I thought actually in my last reading of it, well, I thought quite a lot, and I didn't spot the comparison with It, which Anthony and you others have also pointed out. And it's amazing the way I can miss something as obvious as that. But I think, in a way, the fact that I missed it is a compliment to both authors, to Stephen King and Henry Kuttner, because they both approach the theme so freshly that it's the approach that counts rather than the actual subject matter, if you like.
No knocking on Stephen King, because in order to be able to write a doorstopper of that length and maintain that sense is a amazing feat of its own.
Yeah.
But I do get the sense that it is a homage, shall we say, in a better framing to this story, because it is very similar.
I see that now you pointed it out. Yeah. I was thinking of other things which you haven't actually mentioned, which is how do you classify a story like this? Would it be fantasy or science fiction? Maybe it's an unreal question, an unnecessary question, but I find it quite an interesting one, and I would class it as science fiction. 100%. With the atmosphere of horror and fantasy, but nevertheless the nuts and bolts of it are science fiction. It's a creature from some other planet or dimension that, feeds and goes through life cycles as is described in the story. And incidentally, this life cycle business where it has to maintain itself with the wrong uncle appendage, now that it's chosen to do that in this phase of the cycle, that's kind of obeying laws of nature in a way that gives it the flavor of science fiction to me.
I mean, that's quite clearly science fiction, because there's like several times where it talks about animals and creatures and humanoids that have never existed on planet Earth, right? Like, and showcasing all of this stuff. Now, if instead in those sequences they would just keep showing Earth and different cults, like in Egypt, and then I don't know, in the Middle East somewhere, somewhere in Russia, where people are like sacrificing stuff to this creature all the time, right? Like, then it would have given a very different feeling. Then you would be like, yeah, that's fantasy. But that scene, I think, just solidifies it into science fiction. That Rigetto is some sort of a interdimensional, interplanar, interplanetary threat.
Yeah, I mean, this dropped right into the cosmic horror genre for me, which I guess cosmic horror is a mix of science fiction and horror, right? I mean, from Lovecraft's perspective, the great old ones are they like Cthulhu and his ilk are cosmic beings. They're sort of aliens, right? But just so hugely powerful to again, sort of Asimov's maxim, right? Like, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, which is what I've always saw as what Cthulhu and all those beings that Lovecraft created are so advanced, so other, and so different that they just operate on different physics than us eventually. Yeah, so this was cosmic horror all the way for me. I don't know, XJ, what do you thoughts on that?
I guess the classification would be a matter that would frustrate librarians everywhere. It is fortunately not something that bothers me. It's a good story. I'm done. But yeah, I think I mean, if I have to classify it, I probably would classify it. I mean, I don't even know. Cosmic horror seems as good as any to me. But I did like that glimpse of I don't know what you call it, interstellar, like just like different possibilities of different civilizations. I'm sure I recall something reptilian at one point, which and funnily, I can't pronounce anything today. Funny enough, I think that reptilian race is warm-blooded. That's very interesting to me. I would love to know more.
Yeah. So yeah, it's. I don't know if you guys ever. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Slither. Where I mean, I don't want to spoil that either, but it's sort of like a being that takes over people's bodies or whatever that comes to Earth, fairly reminiscent of other kind of body snatcher kind of horror. But there's a moment where someone comes in contact with this alien creature that takes over people, and she sees, as it's trying to take her over, she sees glimpses of it on taking over other worlds and kind of consuming beings on other worlds. So that's kind of what made me think of. It's that you're getting flashes of this thing existing. I don't know if it can transfer itself between other dimensions or planes, since it lives in some kind of weird other reality. So whether it's on from another planet or it's gone to multiple planets or multiple dimensions, it has reached out. And how long has this thing existed? It's crazy. It's crazy to think that maybe it's always existed or existed for millennia, just reaching out with its appendages, and it's created other wrong uncles on other planets, across the galaxy or the universe, to feed. So that was a really cool glimpse of what the possibilities are.
Totally, I agree with you. And like, the best thing is the death of this cosmic being is so anticlimactic.
Yeah,
like,
just
it's the best way. It's like best way to take out.
I think that in a way it's also like a horrific death. It's like slow starvation where just they can do nothing.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's
You can
totally
do nothing
true.
to
I
get
guess
itself.
what I was
Yeah.
trying to express is, like in all of the Lovecraft stories, for instance, like the showdown scene, so to speak, was like the Call of Cthulhu. The showdown scene was really, really um, vivid and epic and all of that stuff. And all the other H.P. Lovecraft stories that we read have similar epic showdowns, if even if the human side don't always win. But this one is just like so low key.
Mm.
Yeah, it's in the end, it was bound just like any other living creature to needing food, and it just simply starved to death if it didn't get food. And it took a an amoral human child to cause its demise, right? Like
Yeah.
across all the worlds and all its existence, that this creature had never been starved to death by any other being, or until a callous human child who got bored of a game decided to starve it to death by first feeding it to the grandmother, and then knowing it would go to prison. It's so it's great. It's a more hopeful kind of Lovecraftian tale, right?
I
Um,
don't know if you call it hopeful. It's like, oh my god, you
but
have to sacrifice the grandma though. Sacrificing the grandma.
well, it's more hopeful that in a way, in that human beings can actually fight back against this creature by starving it to death. Whereas in the Cthulhu mythos, we are insignificant bugs to them, and it's inevitable that they'll destroy us all, right? So I guess hopeful in that way, not
True.
hopeful in like feed grandma to the monster. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. I was looking for flaws in the story in this latest reading, and I thought I'd found one at first, in that I couldn't really see from the monster's point of view why the wrong uncle was necessary, because the wrong uncle just wasn't doing anything. He was just standing around, and the children were taking the meat straight to the monster. They were bypassing the wrong uncle altogether. Now, I then realized that the wrong uncle is just a standby, as it were, and the answer is that when the monster isn't fed directly, the wrong uncle is activated as a sort of mobile mouth, as it were, and it comes up the stairs and devours the grandmother. That is the answer to my question. So I have to conclude that actually I can't find a flaw in the story after all. I was only um, I was only sort of making sure that I didn't get uh, ambushed, by any of you sharp-witted guys who said, but there's this flaw in the story. Fortunately, I wrapped that one up.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think it's because I was thinking that the wrong uncle was just a projection, like a psychic projection that actually had no agency in the physical world. So that to me was an excellent twist. Was that okay? What's Bobby doing? Like, why did he lock Grandma? Like, it's just a projection, but it had form, it had physical presence in this world, and it was a failsafe. Like, it was like you said, like an extra mouth,
Mhm.
a mobile, an ambulatory mouth. It was just a mouth that looked like a human, right? So it could
Mhm.
feed stuff in an emergency in extremis. And I guess the other kids had more scruples than Bobby, and were like, we have to feed this thing because the adults are clueless. So we have to feed this thing to keep it from eating us.
Yeah.
And then Bobby just didn't get it and just became
Mhm.
sadistic or whatever. Had just treated it like a game and was just too young and amoral as the kids are to realize that and maybe he just didn't like grandma. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he had a grudge. I don't know. She wouldn't let him have as much candy as he wanted. I don't know. Okay, I'll just feed her to the wrong uncle. But yeah, no, it was that was a cool twist to me. It was like, oh gosh, this thing can eat in the real world through a wrong uncle. Uh,
Mm. And that's why they took him away and put him in an asylum or something.
yeah, and they leave that to your imagination what he
Mm.
did to Granny.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. The more I think about the story, the more I love it. Like it's amazing.
I don't think Kuttner ever wrote anything quite as good as this. Actually, I think this is his best story. I could be wrong. I haven't read everything he's written, but I've read quite a few, and some of it's pretty good. His straight science fiction novel Fury about settling the planet Venus is very good, excellent. But I just don't think it's quite on this level.
Yeah. It definitely is better than Thunder in the Void. That was the last story we read, Thunder in the Void. So, but I mean, he did a great job with that story, but it's, and he injected some horrific elements into that too. So maybe he liked that realm he leaned a little more into the sci-fi there for most of that other story, and so here it was more leaning into the horror and terrestrial, like modern day. So, yeah, but I definitely want to try reading more of his work, but.
Yeah, I guess the way I would describe the two stories is that one is a very business-like venture. This one feels more like a craft. Yeah. I don't know what kind of stories does he predominantly write, Robert. Is it kind of like leaning towards the horror kind of genre like this one?
Good question. A lot of them actually are sort of humorous science fiction stories. He wrote a couple of stories about an inventor who can only invent things when he gets drunk, and when he sobers up, he's forgotten how they work. And they're quite good. And he wrote one story about imprinting the personalities of famous people onto one's mind so as to add their talents. And there's a sort of wimpish person who wants to get tough, so he gets the personality of Ivan the Terrible imprinted on his mind. But what he doesn't realize is that Ivan was kept cringing in fear of assassination, so he gets even more wimpish than he was. But anyway, it's all good stuff. But this is his masterpiece, I think.
Okay, I was not expecting comedy as his preferred genre.
Yeah, I just looked up his Wikipedia, and he was a correspondent of Clark Ashton Smith. He was a friend of Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith, which makes total sense. And apparently, they list a bunch of stories that were sort of more embedded in the Cthulhu mythos. Not this one, it doesn't say, but not that Wikipedia is the end all and be all of information on things. But yeah, so it tracks that. But yeah, I would recommend checking that out maybe for more inspiration or for reading. But it seems like he was pen pals or buddies with, one of our favorite authors, Clark Ashton Smith, on this channel, right? And as well as Lovecraft. So that makes sense. Yeah, and it lists him as author of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. So yeah. And he only lived he died at the age of 42. So he only lived to be 42. So
Other than Clark Ashton Smith, all these guys are like very short lived.
Yeah, I mean, it was a sucky job, being an author at that time.
One thing I wanted to bring up, Robert, and I don't know if you have any insight on this, but I'm looking at his list of pseudonyms. And it's extensive, and some of them I recognize: Lewis Paget, Robert Kenyon. So yeah, why? Even Woodrow Wilson Smith, named himself after his favorite president, I guess. I don't know, but why so many pen names?
Yeah. I think maybe partly he was trying to reinvent himself, because some of his work was just hack work, and the readers were getting fed up with it, and he wanted to show what he could do, so he had to I think Lewis Paget actually is a joint pen name of him and his wife Catherine Moore, who was also a well-known author. At least that's what I assumed.
I mean, there's 17 pen names on Wikipedia that under the header known pseudonyms. So he might have had more, but there's to have 17, pen names or pseudonyms. That's
Maybe
a lot.
maybe Ruggero is himself. All of this are like wrong.
Yeah.
Not the.
Yeah, maybe Kuttner was a projection of
Yeah,
Ruggero himself.
yeah.
But
Wrong,
Wrong
wrong dude,
author.
wrong
Yeah.
author.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, I've never seen a list of pen names that long.
Mm.
It seems like it's like little details coming out about him that through reading his work and about his life. As I read more, I want to know more about this guy.
Yeah.
But
All right.
interesting.
Well, Nikki, do you have anything else you wanna talk about?
Well, one more thing. I like the fact that the children found a way to call this thing by the stories and mythologies that they heard in their childhood.
Yeah.
So that
Wizard
was
of
a nice
Oz.
aspect. Yeah, that was a
Mm.
nice aspect to it.
Mm. The
So
spooky.
there's that's definitely missing from a lot of stuff, the association, like in horror stories. And I think when you do it properly and when you do it well, and it's not a cheesy sort of like reference, but it's actually something that's a bit more believable, like in this instance, it really adds to the atmosphere. So while a small thing, there's a tiny like there's just tiny details in the story to just make it slightly better, and there's enough of them where it just becomes a really good story. That's kind of my assessment of it overall.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
I think that's important in life in general, even me, in that the iconography of science fiction is partly what helps keep me sane in this crazy world. And that I think, well, all right, I'm just living in one of these weird science stories, so there's no need to worry too much, you know.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there you go. But not much else to say. It was a good
No.
story.
Hmm.
Okay, I guess
Yeah.
we can come to a scoring. Take it away.
Hmm.
Well, Rob, why don't you tell us what you think of this?
Yeah. Definitely 10 out of 10 for this one, because as I say, I did try to find something wrong with it, but I couldn't find it in the end.
Mhm.
Nikki.
I bet he got a mail with a check from that Bobby guy. All right. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a 9 out of 10 story. I think it's very well made. I have not much to complain about, if at all. The only thing that's keeping it away from 10 is I feel like the tension of the moment of what's going to happen with the aunt and all that stuff, if that was just slightly longer or done slightly more like the rest of the story, it was a bit rushy, just a bit rushy. But at the end of the day, a 9 out of 10 is nothing to scoff at. And I mean, who am I kidding? This is very well written, so this is just nitpicking, really.
Mm.
Anthony.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go 10 out of 10. I'm so pleasantly surprised by the story. I'm gonna give it 10 out of 10. Solid. Just it makes me want to read it again and just recommend it to other people. And just, yeah, and it's if you want the impact of it without reading 1,000 pages, read this story. And if you want a masterclass of like just short stories and how short stories can be so quick and punchy. I mean, short stories. Sometimes you read a short story, it can feel like it takes forever to read it, but this was like just drew me in and just carried me along to the bloody red meat end of it all. So yeah, it's amazing.
Hmm.
Well, I'm happy to give it 9.5 out of 10. And the only little bit of a 0.5 would be I would love to have seen more of that other world stuff. The other places that Ruggeto's been to, that would have totally made my day. But yeah, wonderful story. And I guess that rounds up our score. I think this could be one of the highest scored stories we have read in the history of this podcast. We've got 2 10 out of 10s.
You mean
Sorry?
it's even higher than the snows of Kilimanjaro?
That had the highest score, but from like the reverse.
It's the reverse high score.
One of his pseudonyms, no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Wrong guy, wrong author.
Truly horrific. Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess this is the highest scoring stories we've read so far, and I mean it is.
Might
be.
And I totally would recommend this to anybody to read it. I know we spoiled it for you. Sorry about that, but that's the nature of this.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, but not sorry. All right. Well, if you enjoyed the podcast, like and subscribe. And until the next time, take care.